It was a chilly Tuesday morning in Denver. The clouds hadn't lifted yet, but soft light filtered through the cracks of the kitchen window in Claire Whitmore's wooden house near the forest edge. The coffee machine groaned as usual, slightly louder than the silence in the cabin. Claire sat at the kitchen table, still wearing the cream sweater from the night before. Her salt and pepper hair was loosely tied back, and her eyes stared at the laptop screen. In her inbox, a new email sat quietly at the top. Sender, Madison Whitmore. Subject, blank. She didn't open it right away. Claire had lived long enough to know that subjectless emails always carried a certain weight. People don't forget subject lines by accident. They leave them blank when they're avoiding clarity. A message without a title is often one the sender didn't really want to write. Claire took a deep breath and sipped her coffee as still hot. She hoped it would be something light. Maybe Madison was just sending the latest wedding card design or the hotel booking link for the guests. After all, just a few weeks ago, Claire had helped her daughter pick wedding flowers, approved the menu, and transferred $30 as a deposit for the venue in Napa Valley. Everything had seemed clear. She opened the email. Mom, no dear, no emoji. No thank you for the transfer. The next line was short but enough to extinguish the morning's gentle mood. I think it's better if you watch the wedding via live stream. Claire froze. Her eyes scanned each line, trying to read slowly, as if something might change if she stayed calm enough. Andrew's family wants to keep the guest list very minimal. You understand, right? Don't overthink it. We'll send the meet link before the wedding. It'll be almost like you're there. At the end, Madison wrote one word. Low. Claire didn't laugh. She didn't frown either. She simply sat still, setting her coffee cup down on the table with precision, without a sound. In her mind, there was no anger, no tears, just a quiet, downward slip of realization. She had been cut out of her own story. Claire had once been the main character. It wasn't something she often said aloud, but it was undeniable. She had once juggled 3 jobs to get both kids through college. She made breakfast at 4 a.m. and got home when the streetlights came on. She skipped her own birthdays so her daughter could have the perfect prom dress. She stood in a rented kitchen, maxing out her 3rd credit card just to buy a plane ticket for her daughter's job relocation. Claire had once been the axis around which the family turned, and now she was offered only the live stream. No invitation, no family photo, no seat, no corsage, no glance from her daughter as she walked down the aisle. Just a link with the word LOL. She didn't reply right away. Claire closed the laptop and wiped a small coffee ring off the table, like cleaning up a minor accident. Everything stayed still. Only the ticking wall clock broke the silence. It wasn't a blow, it was a thin, deep cut. The kind of pain that doesn't bleed, but changes how you walk from that day on. She opened her phone, replied with just 4 words. Wishing you a lovely day. No reproach, no rage. Just a period at the end of what looked like a simple wish but was actually a one-way ticket out of years of quiet sacrifice. On the way to work, Claire didn't play music. She kept the car window slightly open, letting cold air pass through her sleeve. The road ahead was one she'd driven for over a decade. But today, it felt unfamiliar, like it was leading somewhere new. A world where she was no longer the center of motherhood, but just a blurred background figure in someone else's wedding photo. She didn't cry. She wasn't angry. She only thought, I did everything, and there's no invitation. Claire wasn't the sentimental type, but in the drawer next to her desk at work, she still kept a birthday card from Madison when she was 8. The paper had yellowed with time, but the messy handwriting in purple marker was still there. I love Mommy the most in the world. When I grow up, I'll buy you a big house, a massage chair, and ice cream every day. Claire hadn't kept the card for the promises. She kept it because it was the last time Madison had written to her in that unguarded, childlike voice. The law office where Claire worked wasn't fancy. The carpet was worn, the printer jammed often. But one thing always ran reliably: stability. Claire had worked there for 18 years. After her husband died, she chose this job not because she loved it, but because it had fixed hours and paid just enough to live. Not high, but steady. She used to joke with her coworkers that she wasn't good at law, just good at keeping everything running on time. But deep down, she knew. She was the quiet pillar holding the office together, just like she had once been the pillar of her family. When her daughter changed majors for the second time and needed an extra year of college, Claire didn't ask why. She just worked overtime, downgraded her personal insurance plan, and quietly wired the tuition on time. When her son got engaged and needed help buying a house, she co-signed the loan and even added 10-0 to help redo the kitchen. When Madison had a breakup at 27, Claire flew to New York, made soup in her tiny rental kitchen, and slept on a folding chair for 3 nights to comfort her. Claire never counted. She didn't count the overtime hours, didn't count the weekends without invitations, didn't count the nights spent alone, worrying about her credit score. She only remembered one thing: how to make sure her children never lacked anything. That was how Claire loved, not with words, but with action. That afternoon, Robert, Claire's boss, brought her a latte from the cafe downstairs. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he joked. "Didn't sleep?" Claire gave a faint smile and nodded. She didn't say her daughter had just cut her out of the wedding. She didn't mention the email, didn't mention the 30-0 already transferred, or the other 50-0 she almost sent, because saying it out loud would mean redefining what it meant to be a mother, and she wasn't ready for that. Her phone buzzed. A message from Madison. "Mom, please answer. This isn't something to blow up. It's just a guest list. Andrew doesn't want to make things awkward with his family." Claire read the texts and set the phone face down on her desk. Not out of anger, but because she was trying to understand, not react. At what point had her daughter, the same girl who once drew ketchup hearts on toast, come to believe that giving her mother a seat at her wedding could be awkward? That evening, Claire didn't turn on the TV. She poured a glass of red wine and sat on the porch, watching headlights flicker on the distant highway. The city lights beyond looked like the hope that had dimmed inside her. Still there, but far away. The memories returned. The times Claire called during her lunch break just to remind her daughter to bring a jacket. The nights she stood at the door, watching Madison sleep through the cracked opening. The trips to the park, the parent-teacher meetings. The times she stood silently outside her daughter's room, waiting for the teenage anger to pass. All those moments, and still, they hadn't earned her a seat. She wasn't sad about being excluded. She was sad that no one saw it as something that could hurt. In life, some kinds of pain are invisible because the ones causing it believe they're doing something normal. Claire sipped her wine, eyes fixed on the dark line of trees behind the house. An owl called out, "Alone." No one called her mommy anymore. No more heart-shaped toast. No more flowers picked off the sidewalk, hidden in her lunchbox. Only one email without a subject line. Claire had never associated the word exclusion with something as soft as an email. She used to think of it as something that happened on the playground when her daughter was left out by classmates, or in the looks of young mothers at the park who saw her widow quietly soothing her child between 2 work shifts. She never imagined the first person to take away her presence would be the very daughter she once carried in her aching arms after every back-breaking shift. That afternoon, after shutting down her office computer, Claire didn't drive straight home. She slowly cruised through familiar streets, the amber streetlights spilling over the pavement like pages of an old book she had read 100 times yet could never quite memorize the ending. Along the way, she turned into the parking lot of a place she had known for over 20 years, First Federal Bank. Carlos, the branch manager, had known Claire since her kids were in middle school. When she opened savings accounts for Madison, then Ethan, he had walked her through every step. "Mrs. Whitmore." He stood up from his desk, extending his hand like always. "How can I help today?" Claire sat down. Her gestures were slow but deliberate. Her voice was calm, without the slightest hesitation. "I'd like to cancel the 50-0 transfer to the Belmont estate in Napa." Carlos raised an eyebrow. "The wedding transfer?" Claire nodded. "You're sure? It's just a few hours away from being processed. There may be a fee." "That's fine. I need it stopped." A pause. Carlos didn't press. He simply said, "We'll take care of it right away." On the way home, Claire turned on the radio. A classic country song came on, but she didn't hear the lyrics. The voice faded into the background as thoughts screamed louder in her head. Why must a mother's love be proven through money? Claire couldn't remember the last time she bought herself new clothes. Her leather coat worn at the cuff had been a holiday gift from a long-ago bonus. She had almost returned it to put the money toward Madison's tuition. She didn't regret the money. She regretted that her love had been reduced to an investment with the return of a live stream link. At home, her phone flashed nonstop. 7 missed calls from Madison, 2 texts from Ethan, a missed FaceTime call. Claire didn't answer. She simply walked into the kitchen, opened the cabinet, and pulled out a bottle of red wine she had been saving for a celebration that never came. The wine swirled in the glass under the kitchen light. Claire stepped out onto the porch, leaned on the wooden railing, and stared into the moonless night. She remembered Madison at age 5, those eyes wide with pride, as she sang "You Are My Sunshine" on her kindergarten stage. Claire had clapped the loudest, had cried the most, and now Madison was building a new stage, the biggest ceremony of her life. And Claire wasn't allowed in the audience. Around 9 p.m., the doorbell rang. It was Ethan, still in work clothes, tie loosened, holding his phone, looking more worried than angry. "Mom, why haven't you answered your phone?" Claire opened the door, stepped aside. She didn't speak right away. She wanted to listen first. She always wanted to listen first. Ethan walked straight to the living room, placed his phone on the table, and began talking like it had been rehearsed. "Madison's freaking out. The photographer canceled because there's no payment. Andrew's under pressure from his parents. They're saying, your canceling the transfer proves you don't really want to be there." Claire cut him off. Softly, but clearly. "Do you remember who first said I shouldn't be there?" Ethan froze. Andrew didn't want awkwardness. Madison just wanted to keep the peace. Keeping the peace means striking your mother off the guest list? He didn't answer. He turned away. Claire didn't raise her voice. She just stood still, like someone who had heard this song too many times and no longer felt moved by its melody. "Do you remember who helped you rewrite your resume after your first firing?" she asked. "When Madison had a high fever before her entrance exam, who stayed up all night with a cold compress? When your father died, who dug her hands into the soil and rebuilt our lives from scratch?" Ethan looked at his mother. His eyes reddened. "Mom, don't make this a big deal." That sentence, that was the final blow. Claire didn't shout. She didn't lash out. She simply stood, walked to the door, and said, "Leave. I'm not taking visitors tonight." "Mom." "Out, Ethan. I need quiet." He stood for a moment, then bowed his head and walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft click, but in Claire's chest, it echoed like the snap of a cord pulled too long and finally breaking. That night, Claire didn't sleep. She brewed tea, opened her laptop, and typed a few thank you emails to colleagues, something small to hold on to remind herself she was still kind. Her phone stayed lit. Madison had messaged, "Mom, I don't understand why you're doing this. You're ruining my big day. If you just send the money, we can talk again, okay?" Claire read the message over and over. The last line hit hardest. "If you send the money, we can talk again." If, then, a cold negotiation between two people, no longer a mother and daughter. The next morning, as sunlight filtered through the blinds, Claire realized something. Silence is also a decision, a form of protest that needs no slamming doors or broken glass. She got out of bed and brewed coffee. She didn't check how many messages had arrived overnight. She had begun the quiet work of choosing herself. Friday morning. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen window. Claire poured coffee into her familiar ceramic mug, the one Madison had given her for her 13th birthday, with the faded letters, "World's Best Mom," nearly washed away by time and dish soap. The phone kept ringing. 19 missed calls, 7 messages, 3 voicemails. Claire didn't open a single one, not because she was angry, but because, for the first time in years, she was learning how to stay with her own feelings instead of rushing off to fix everyone else's. Madison didn't stop. Another text arrived at 9:04 a.m. "Mom, Andrew and his parents are really upset. They say I'm not strong enough to set boundaries. You know I didn't mean to hurt you, but now everything is falling apart. Can you help me one last time?" One last time. Claire sighed. She remembered saying those exact words when she handed Ethan her last $10 to help him pay off his college credit card debt. Then again, one last time, when she helped him make a down payment on his house. Then again, one last time, when she bailed Madison out of a disastrous relationship at 27. The last times never stopped multiplying. Around noon, as Claire was reviewing contracts for a new housing development project in West Denver, a new personal email popped up. Subject line, "Please, don't ruin my wedding." She clicked it without expecting much, just curious what stage of emotional spin Madison had landed in now. "Mom, I know you're upset about the live stream, but you don't understand the pressure from Andrew's family. They're worried about appearances, about emotions during the ceremony. If you're there, they're afraid it'll cause unnecessary tension." Claire paused her reading. "But now, we've lost the venue deposit. The florist won't continue unless we pay the rest today. You don't have to give your blessing, but please don't ruin everything. If you make the transfer, I'll talk to Andrew again about you attending." No apology. No, I was wrong. Just a negotiation. A cost-benefit analysis Claire was invited to take part in if she was willing to pay her share. 12:45 p.m. Robert, Claire's boss, stopped by her desk. "Lunch? There's a new Italian place nearby. Looks decent." Claire nearly declined out of habit, but then nodded. She needed a space where no one needed anything from her. The meal was simple creamy pasta and a glass of water. Robert talked about his grandkids, about running after them in the yard and nearly passing out. Tiring, but fun. Every time I see them, I realize how fast time flies. Claire nodded. When he paused and gently asked, "Are you okay?" she found herself nodding again, and then began to talk. About Madison. About the wedding, about the email, the money, the live stream, about the silence and the quiet removal from a life she once thought she was central to. Robert didn't interrupt. He didn't advise. He just waited, listened. Then he placed his hand on the table, lightly squeezed hers, and said, "Claire, sometimes love isn't about giving more. It's about knowing when to stop." When she returned home, someone was sitting on her porch steps. At first, Claire's heart jumped. She thought it was Madison. But no, it was Sophia, the girl who'd once been Madison's best friend since 5th grade. The same girl who used to shout, "Aunt Claire," while running through her yard, now stood up thinner, holding a takeout coffee cup. "I'm sorry for showing up unannounced." "It's okay," Claire said, unlocking the door. "Want to come in for tea?" In the kitchen, Sophia looked around like she was searching for pieces of her childhood. Claire brewed tea, set down 2 mugs, and sat across from her. "Emily sent you, didn't she?" Claire asked, already knowing. Sophia nodded. "She's a mess. Everything's falling apart. They lost the venue, the flowers. Andrew's angry. His parents are threatening to cancel the wedding." Claire stayed silent, her hands steady, her eyes still. "What did she say?" Claire asked. "She said she doesn't think you love her anymore." Claire let out a soft laugh, almost bitter. "I've loved her so much she forgot love doesn't come from a bank account." Sophia lowered her head. "I didn't come to ask you to forgive Madison. I just wanted to ask, is there any way for her to make it right? Is there something she can do?" Claire thought for a moment. She looked at Sophia still, holding that trace of childhood innocence, though her voice had matured. "An apology only means something if it comes before the consequences. And if it doesn't?" Sophia asked. "Then it's just damage control." Sophia didn't stay long. Before leaving, she turned and hugged Claire tightly. No long speech, just warmth. "I'm sorry you're going through this. You don't deserve to be treated that way." "Thank you, Soph. You're braver than most adults I know." That night, Claire sat by the window. It rained lightly. The wind carried the smell of soil, of grass, of a season she hadn't yet named. Her laptop sat on the table. An email from Madison. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't realize how far this had gone. I just wanted everything to be smooth. I didn't mean to hurt you." Claire didn't reply. She just clicked archive. Didn't delete it, but didn't feel the need to respond either. The next morning, the phone stopped ringing after the 41st call. The final message came from Ethan. "Mom, Madison's having a small ceremony in the backyard. Would you maybe want to come?" Claire looked at the screen. A few years ago, she would have baked a cake, picked out a dress, done her hair, brought gifts. But this morning, instead, she set the phone down, made herself tea, sat out on the porch, and rested in the silence where no one needed her to fix anything or say anything at all. Claire didn't go to the backyard ceremony, not out of anger, but because she saw no reason to be present in a place where her presence only had value once it was invited back in. She didn't cancel anything further. She didn't write a scathing email. She simply kept living quietly, steadily, like someone who had finally learned how to breathe without needing permission. On Monday, she arrived at the office earlier than usual. A light gray blazer, her hair still neatly pinned back, her steps steady. No one noticed anything had changed. But to her, everything had shifted from the inside. She no longer checked her phone during breaks, no longer kept alerts on for family emails, no longer defaulted to blaming herself first whenever something went wrong. She started yoga again Wednesday evening class, signed up for a weekend pottery course, began eating dinner alone at restaurants she'd passed for years but never entered because it's a waste to go alone. Not anymore. Now, sitting alone wasn't emptiness. It was choice. Madison didn't send any more texts. Just one email, a few weeks later, nearly a page long. I know I messed up, but everything felt like too much. I couldn't tell what was really mine and what was just pressure from Andrew's family. I know I can't ask for forgiveness, but if someday you're willing to talk, I'll be here. Claire read it once, didn't save it, didn't delete it, just sat with it quietly and made herself a cup of tea. Ethan stopped by one late evening, unannounced. Claire was clipping dried lavender in the backyard planted last spring. Ethan stood by the wooden fence, holding a paper bag. Brought you lemon cake from that place you like. Claire nodded. He stepped inside, placed the bag on the table, and looked around the kitchen like he was chasing a memory. How have you been? I'm well. A long pause. Ethan swirled a glass of water in his hand, then looked directly at his mother. Do you think I'm like Madison too? Claire looked up, her gaze calm, neither accusing nor avoiding. I think you've gotten used to not choosing sides, but you forgot that silence is a choice too. Ethan nodded, head slightly bowed. I didn't know how to be on anyone's side without hurting someone. Claire placed her tea on the table, gently. And in trying not to hurt anyone, you made me feel alone. No tears, no blame, just a truth that landed straight to the heart. Ethan sat down, eyes red. He nodded again, exhaled. I'm sorry. Claire didn't say, it's okay. Didn't say, I understand. She simply reached for a small plate, unwrapped the cake, and poured more tea. Eat. It doesn't taste good cold. Next month, Claire turned a business trip into a short 2-day break. She drove to Estes Park, stayed in a wooden cabin overlooking the pine forest. In the mornings, she walked along dirt trails still damp with morning mist. In the afternoons, she read by the window phone off all day. No calls, no requests, no expectations, no complaints. She used to think this would feel lonely, but now she realized freedom doesn't come from being understood. It comes from accepting yourself, even when others don't. On Monday morning, Claire returned to the office. She passed the meeting room where the project team was in discussion. Robert looked up, caught her eye. Back already? Claire smiled gently, and better than ever. That evening, she wrote a single line in her journal. If my presence can be negotiated, then so can my kindness, and it should have boundaries. And just like that, the days kept passing. No more unanswered calls. No more messages loaded with expectations. Just a woman 49 years old, living in a wooden house on the edge of suburbia. Quiet, strong, no longer needing anyone's permission to be at peace. 6:00 a.m. Sunlight filtered through thin linen curtains, casting soft light onto the wooden kitchen and the small table meant for two, now just one. Claire placed the kettle on the stove. The scent of coffee floated gently through the room. There were no more ringing phones. No emails waiting for a reply. No one asking where she was or what she was doing. Only the sound of wind brushing the porch. The soft tap of her low leather shoes on the floor. The rustle of a folded newspaper waiting to be read with hot tea. Claire opened the window, took a deep breath in. This is my house, she thought. This is my life. There was no dramatic crescendo to the thought. Just a truth large enough to fill the silence. A truth she had forgotten for years. She didn't need to be at the wedding to know she was a mother. She didn't need to be needed to know she had worth. At 49, Claire wasn't starting over. She was just finally beginning.